I'm really excited about today's video because I am talking about possibly one of my all-time favourite plants that I grew up around in South Africa, and this is Euphorbia. I had these beautiful plants in my garden as I was growing up, and all the surrounding spaces around me as I was running around barefoot, and I'm not quite sure if I appreciated them as much as I do now. I must have done, because I'm so fascinated by them, and I've got a few in my collection now as houseplants. In this video, I'm going to be sharing everything I know, from how I care for them for the best light conditions, how I water them, pests, repotting. I'm going to propagate one today as well, so I'll show you how I propagate my Euphorbia. So let's get going. There are over 2,000 recognised varieties of Euphorbia, and whenever I see one, I have to have it. Whether it's a new one or even one that I already have, I have this thing with Euphorbia that if I was living in a warmer country now, I would have a garden full of Euphorbia. But unfortunately in the UK, the weather is just too cold and they won't survive. So I will just collect them in my house and in my plant room instead. I currently have 4 different varieties, and one of those varieties, I have about 6 or 7 of them in my house. Some I've rescued, some I've propagated, and they've just grown loads. Some I need to pot in pots together, just not to have so many of them because it just takes up a lot of space. But I just love these plants, and they are super easy, low maintenance. So if you're looking for a low maintenance, easy plant that loves sun, then this plant will just be right for you. One of my latest additions is the Euphorbia tirocali. Now, I do apologise if I don't pronounce it how it's pronounced where you are. I'm sorry about that, but this is how I know it. It's the Euphorbia tirocali. It's also known as the pencil cactus. It's quite small at the moment. I would quite like to repot it into a slightly bigger pot with some fresh soil, because I have watered this plant recently, but the soil has dried out very quickly, which tells me that it's possibly in a need of some fresh soil and a repot. And I just know if I pop it in a bigger pot, it will grow a little bit bigger as well. So first one, love it. Can't wait to see it grow more. My second newest addition is my Euphorbia mayoranthani, and this plant is in bloom at the moment. I'll give you a bit of a close-up of these beautiful yellow blooms that it has. You may not be able to see it from here, but I have done a bit of a close-up, which I'll leave up here, and I just absolutely love this plant. It just caught my eye as soon as I walked in to where I was. I had to have it. It's so unusual, and I need to get a decorative pot for it still. But I just, you know, when you forget that you have something, and then every morning I come downstairs and I spot this plant and I just get this burst of excitement because I remember that I got it. Simple things please me, but I really love this plant, and this is one of my new additions as well. I also have the Euphorbia trigona, and the plant behind me, which you possibly can't see, I'm going to try and move this one. They're a bit precarious because they're so tall now, but I have a Euphorbia trigona here in my corner. I don't know if you can see it, but this cutting here is from the mother plant, and it's just grown so much. This plant here is still in the original pot that I've potted it in. I'll show you how I have propagated it and how much it has grown now. It's only been a few years. I also need to repot it. I need to get one of those cylinder pots. They're normally terracotta, but they're great for plants like these because this dinky pot that I've got here is just not holding the weight of this tall plant. So I need to find a cylinder terracotta pot. They look beautiful, but also they're really quite practical to keep these plants upright. But anyway, this is a cutting from my mother plant. And then also, sticking to Euphorbia trigona, I've got this one here and 4 more of these over here, and these have all been rescues, hence the little stick here, because I mean, I'll talk about some root rot and common problems in a minute, but these were all rescue Euphorbia, and I brought them back to life. So I've now got all of these Euphorbia trigona plants on my hands, which I'm not complaining about, but I'm gonna have to pop a few in one pot just to make a bit of room for some other plants, because it's just a little bit too much, I realise, just to have this many. Or is it? Not really. They're lovely. And my other beautiful one is my Euphorbia ingens, and this just reminds me of my upbringing. I had these plants around me, and even now when we go to South Africa and we fly into the very remote area where I grew up in, it's kind of what you would say in South Africa is the bushveld, where it's so remote where all the animals are roaming. You just come in with a really small plane and get off the plane, go into the building, and these beautiful plants are just all over, and it just makes me feel so happy because it feels like I'm back home with all these plants. I appreciate them more now, that's for sure, since living here and since being so into houseplants. I must have loved them as I was growing up, because I have them in my space now and I really appreciate them now. Let's get into the care and how I care for my Euphorbia. Actually, before I get into the care, let's just talk about the toxicity. I can never say that word. The toxic side of these plants, because they are highly toxic and they can be an irritant to the skin. So I accidentally just knocked this plant as I was bringing it up to my plant room, and even these leaves have knocked slightly. Whenever it gets knocked, or when you cut it to propagate to make more plants, a white sap comes out, and that sap can cause high irritation. It can cause blindness as well. So if you have little people around that are likely to knock into your Euphorbia, or pets that like to munch your plants, these might not be the plants for you because of the sap and because it's so highly toxic. So just something to be really mindful of the white sap. I will leave a bit of a close-up of what the sap looks like. It goes away after a while and the plant heals itself when it is knocked, so it's not to be worried about, but it just needs to be treated with caution if you've got pets or little people around, or even for yourself. Protect your skin, wear gloves so that you don't get any of that sap onto your skin. Some people are a little bit more susceptible to the irritation on skins, but if you're not sure, please just be 100% sure. Wear some gloves, wear glasses if you propagate it, which I will do today, just to protect yourself from the sap. All of my Euphorbias get at least 4 or 5 hours of bright light a day. It doesn't necessarily get that much amount of direct sunlight where the sun directly beams onto it, but it's definitely in a bright spot. It can tolerate some bright direct light. It loves a bright spot. So even if you have a conservatory that's nice and warm, it loves a warm temperature as well. If I can't give it the light that it needs during the autumn or the winter months, I use a grow light. So I don't know if you can see, but I've got these grow lights here on my succulents and cacti shining onto my Euphorbia, and I just top up the light requirements with a grow light. Grow lights are super easy. They're really inexpensive to run as well and to buy. And if you've got a slightly darker corner but you want a plant there, you can absolutely have a grow light, because I find grow lights work really well to top up on the light that might not be there. So if you do want a Euphorbia but you've got a darker corner, a grow light is the answer for you. It's often useful, especially during the autumn and winter months where the light is slightly less and not so bright as you want it to be for Euphorbia. It's a good idea to turn your Euphorbia with every water, especially the Euphorbia I have against the wall, because otherwise the side against the wall, if it's just left against the wall, will never get the adequate light from that side. So I always turn my plants just to make sure it gets some adequate light. Once every 2 weeks or whenever you water your Euphorbia is a good idea, just to make sure the whole plant gets adequate sunlight all around. Euphorbias store water in their thick stems, so that's why this plant is great for someone who is an underwaterer like me. I've unintentionally become an underwaterer because I've got so many plants in my collection, I can't quite get to water them all, which is great if you've got a plant like this. Every environment is different, so I am always cautious if I say that I water in the summer every 2 weeks or so and maybe once a month in the winter, because your environment might be very different to mine. They might be in different pots, in different soil, so it might dry out at a very different rate. But just like any other plant that you have, always rather underwater than overwater, because we tend to kill with kindness and we water too much. That is very much the case for Euphorbia. Because they store water in their thick stems, there isn't a need to worry about watering very frequently. I allow my Euphorbia to dry out at least half of the top of the pot, and then I give it a really good soak. But the really important thing to be mindful of is, if you do give it a really good soak and a good drench, is to make sure, I was just going to pick up this huge one, but I don't think that's a good idea. So I'm just going to use a smaller example, this Euphorbia pencil cactus, for example. If I water my pencil cactus, or any Euphorbia for that matter, then I would take it out the pot. And because it's in a pot with drainage holes, I would give it a really good soak and let all that water drain through, and then pop it back in its decorative pot. Always make sure never to water directly into a pot and to leave any excess water at the bottom, because these plants can be susceptible to root rot. They don't like soggy soil. That's what happened to these plants that I've rescued. That's why these sticks are in there, because the stems were rotting because they were overwatered, and I had to let that soil dry out, and in some cases I had to completely repot the plant to give it some fresh soil to rescue the roots. If you're an underwaterer, this is the perfect plant for you, because they are very forgiving and they don't need as much water as some tropical house plants, like a peace lily doesn't like to dry out, or like a begonia doesn't like to dry out. These plants are very forgiving and can thrive with some minimal water. Some overwatering signs on a Euphorbia could be that the stems are really soft and kind of breaking away. You can press on the base, especially around the base where the roots are. If there's some yellow spots and some blackening of the base, and it just kind of pushes in when you press it gently, it's a sign of root rot. And a really good thing to do would be to rescue the plant, take it out the soil, check what's going on underneath, and you could save it by cutting all the different stems that are not affected by propagating the plant. And I will show you how to propagate Euphorbia in a minute, but really look out for some mushy stems, some softness around the base, because that's definitely a sign of overwatering. Some signs of underwatering could be that the stems are kind of wrinkled in, kind of dented in. I've also found, I've got another Euphorbia up there. How many are there? 8? Loads. That Euphorbia that I have on my windowsill, very similar to these ones, just slightly different size. I have found that if I don't give it enough water, the leaves drop. Now, I can't quite figure out if that is because of underwatering. I know sometimes it's just a natural thing that they go through and the leaves drop naturally, but I've kind of had the feeling that that was also due to underwatering. So if the leaves of your Euphorbia drop, try and kind of figure out if it's because you have underwatered very slightly. So the leaves are back on now, and I've been a bit more conscious to water it. So if you know Euphorbia really well, could that be a reason why the leaves are dropping? Please let me know in the comments. I think I've figured out that it was because of very underwater plant, but please let me know if I'm wrong. The plant's thriving now and it's got some lovely leaves on, but yeah, underwatering signs could be crinkled up stems, and also the soil being just constantly dry. If you're never sure about when to water or what's going on in that soil, I always talk about a moisture meter, but I find them so helpful. Stick it into your pot, it tells you what goes on in the middle of that pot and in the soil, whether it's dry, moist or wet, and it's just another kind of gauge to use, as well as a bit of common sense and, you know, intuition. But a moisture meter works really well, especially if you're new to houseplants and new to watering. When it comes to repotting euphorbias, they are my perfect plant. If you've seen my previous videos, repotting isn't something that is on the top of my priority list when it comes to houseplant care, which is strange because it's an activity that I absolutely love. I love getting my hands in soil and having that connection to nature, because that's how I grew up. I walked around barefoot, I had dirty hands in soil, making mud cakes. So naturally, repotting for me is my connection to nature. But Euphorbia, so what I was going to say is I don't repot my tropical houseplants as often as I should. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent then, but Euphorbia don't need to be repotted as frequently as tropical houseplants. You can repot them every 3 years. I have had my original Euphorbia in the original pot for 4 years now. It is still growing, it is still thriving. I know I need to repot it, and I definitely will do very soon. I need to find a bigger pot for it because it's just starting to topple, and I have to rely on the wall to kind of sometimes prop it up for me. So I do realise I do need to repot it, but these plants can go for about 3 years without having a repot, and they are super low maintenance, and they suit me perfectly well because I am not the quickest repotter that you would find, but once I do it and I have a bit of time, I absolutely love it, and I see such a huge benefit when I repot my plants. But these are perfect for me because they don't scream at me every year to repot them. All of the Euphorbia that I have are currently in plastic pots, and it works really well, although you can pot them directly into terracotta as well. Terracotta is, I'm just going to pick up a really small plant and a pot, just so not to pick up the huge ones. But terracotta are great for succulents, for cacti. It just drains out the excess moisture from the soil, which is great for something like a Euphorbia that doesn't like a soggy soil. So you could pot directly into terracotta if you have a lovely terracotta pot. And when it comes to pots with drainage holes or no drainage holes, I always, for my Euphorbia, pot them into pots with drainage because I like to know that that water is draining through, because the plants could be quite susceptible to root rot, and I just want to make sure that all of that water has drained through. Of course, you can pot into a pot directly with no drainage holes, but you'd have to, I would recommend to have a drainage layer of some pebbles just to lift that soil so that the plant doesn't sit in soggy soil when you water. Also, if you pot into a pot with no drainage, you have to really trust your watering to know that you're not going to overwater your plant. So just a few options. I typically like to pot into plastic pots, but if I do find a really nice terracotta, especially a cylindrical, is that the right word? A cylinder terracotta pot for this one, I will pot directly into there because I think they're beautiful and they are porous, which fits perfectly well for these plants. The best soil to use for repotting Euphorbia is a well-draining soil. I like to mix all my soils together, and I use a Soil mixed with some extra grit, some horticultural soap works really well, and I also add some worm castings to my soil for a natural fertilizer. I personally find the succulent soil mixes that you can find commonly in garden centres or in shops are still a little bit too dense for me. So I might use that soil, but I add extra grit just to make it a really nice, well-draining soil, because otherwise I just find it really dense. And plants like Euphorbia especially don't like a dense soil. They like extra gritty sand, horticultural soap added to it, so that when you water the plant, it just free flows and just drains away properly. So I'd love to know what you use for Euphorbia, for your cacti plants as well. Do you use the traditional or the common bags that you find, or do you add some extra elements to it to make it a nice free draining soil? Please let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you do and how you find the common soil that you find in bags in shops. Luckily, with all of my Euphorbia, I haven't, touch wood, I haven't had pests on my Euphorbia. Because it's so highly toxic, and the white sap that it produces when it's knocked, or if you can imagine a pest like scale or a mealybug digging into the plant, the sap will very quickly come out, which will just deter the pests. That doesn't mean that it's not susceptible to pests. It can be, so it still needs to be checked. These plants can be susceptible to mealybugs, which are the white, fluffy, cotton ball-like creatures that look quite cute and soft to touch, but they're little vampires and they can just suck all the goodness out of your plant. They can also be quite susceptible to scale, so just always check over your plants as you water. So for scale and mealybugs, I would use 100% rubbing alcohol. If you're ever unsure about pests, whether it is a pest, how to treat it, always ask the question. I'm more than happy to help. There's some lovely plant communities out there, so if you're never sure what's going on with your plant, what it is, how to treat it, always ask the question. I'm now going to show you how to propagate a Euphorbia, and I'm going to use one of my big ones here. I'm going to bring it over. I'm going to put some protection on. I've got my glasses as well, just to set an example to show you that you really need to protect your hands, your skin and your eyes. So let's get this plant in, and I'm going to show you how to propagate a Euphorbia. So I'm going to pretend the very big one that I have, and this is the very original Euphorbia that I have had since day one, and this has produced so many beautiful cuttings and plants for me. I need to move it so slowly because I'm very conscious that it needs a bigger pot, and if I move too quickly it might just topple over and it might just fall onto me. I really need to have my gloves on at this point now. What point am I going to propagate? I hope you can see it. I don't want to cut one of the biggest stems. So which one am I going to... Actually, I am just checking. I think I'm going to just cut a small one for you to see right now. I hope you can see that all right. I'm going to cut the small one for now. I have just realised I have got two gloves of the same hand, which isn't very helpful, but that doesn't matter. I'm just gonna pop that on. My gloves are so dirty, just from sand and, you know, repotting and all that lovely stuff, so it's actually quite clean dirt. Always make sure that you use some clean sharp scissors, some secateurs, that's especially just used for plants. I always clean my secateurs in between cuts so I don't, you know, carry anything that might be on this plant onto another plant. I'm just going to get my glasses. Now these aren't safety glasses, these are my reading glasses that I don't normally wear when it comes to plant care, but I figured it's some form of protection, which is better than nothing. So I'm just going to get my glasses very quickly, and who knows, I might even be able to, gosh, I can see very well. I've never used my glasses for plant care, so I might just have to do that. I normally only really use it for reading. So the trick here is to make sure that you have everything protected and make sure to be ready. My glasses are steaming up. It's not even hot in here. Could you see my glasses are steaming up? Just really odd. Anyway, I'm going to be ready to catch that sap that's coming out of the stem. And I hope you can see all right, but I'll give you a bit of a close-up. And I'm just going to cut as close to the base, and I can just see that sap coming out so quickly. So that's that white sap that's coming out. You can run this underwater and the bleeding of the sap will stop really quickly, but I'm just going to dab that. And the white sap here is kind of trickling down as well. Normally, I tend to take at least 3 or 4 cuttings, and normally I would, take slightly bigger cuttings. I've just, for the purpose to show you here, because I think this one was at the right level. Hopefully you can see it all right. But I would normally take about 3 or 4 cuttings, or as many as you would like to take, because just in case that cut doesn't take, or if the cut rots or anything kind of goes wrong with it, it's a really good idea that you've got more than one. I never take one, I always take multiples, just to make sure that it's a better chance of the plant kind of taking and growing. So I'm just going to dab there, just to try and heal that white sap coming out, and so it doesn't really trickle down, but just give it a little wipe. I'm just going to put this plant back into its spot, to here in its corner, and there we go. Lovely. Now this cut this is very precarious. Just pop it. That's really its mum, isn't it? Because I took this from the big one and it's nearly caught up with it. It's quite impressive how much it's grown. Coming back to this cutting here. This cutting I will now leave for even up to 5-7 days. You could leave this to heal over, because the cut that you've just made on the stem has to callus over, it has to heal over, and you'll notice after a few days that it almost looks like that cut has started to close up, and that's the cut healing over. After about 7 days, I would prepare my pot, prepare my soil, and put cut side down into the soil and pop it in a bright spot to start to grow. And it's as easy and as simple as that. But just make sure, if we don't let that cut heal, it will just potentially rot the stem and rot the cutting. So do make sure, just pop it in a bright spot on a clean surface and pot it in about a week's time, and you'll very soon have a brand new plant that is as nearly as tall as the mother plant. They are super easy to propagate. I hope you enjoyed seeing my Euphorbia collection. If you have Euphorbia, I'd love to know what varieties you have, so please let me know in the comments below. If you have propagated them, I'd love to hear how you got on, or any other wisdom or tips or any interesting facts about Euphorbia that you have. Please let us know in the comments so that we can all read. I think they're such fascinating plants, and I would love to live in a warm country again, just so that I can grow them outside of my garden, but I just admire them when I go back to South Africa. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about Euphorbia or about your houseplants in general, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.